Hi everyone, Lisa Soames-Peck from Spellbound Miniatures here. Welcome to our grandfather clock tutorial. In this series we're going to be making these very cute grandfather clocks, and as you can see there's several different versions. You can mix and match the elements. So because there's so many possible elements and it's quite a complicated build, we're going to build this over the course of several different tutorials so that you don't get overwhelmed. There's quite a lot of pieces, so we're going to start at the very beginning. If you're new to Cricut, that's okay too. I'm going to show you from the ground up how we cut the craft board for the grandfather clocks, and some little tips and tricks that will help you in any of your miniature work. One of the questions I'm most often asked is, why do I layer up craft board and not use less layers of matte board? And if you're new to Cricut materials, this is craft board. It comes in brown, black or white. This is the brown. It's very thin and very flexible. And it's got, I don't know if you can see that, it's the same colour all the way through. Matte board is a lot thicker and has a white core, and you can get it in several different colours, or lots of different colours. And it's matte board in the US, matte board in the UK, and it's the thing that you would typically use to, when you're framing pictures, it's the mount that surrounds the picture. And then we also have chipboard. This is Cricut chipboard, which is thicker again and quite sturdy. The thing with very complicated or intricate shapes like the top of this grandfather clock is to cut it in a thicker material. It doesn't work out so well. So I've done a test piece here, and you can see there, I don't know, I'm going to put a photo up zooming in. I've cut the same top piece there in matte board and it's chewed it up, but I'll put a photo up now of it zoomed in, and you can see that the knife blade, which is a bigger blade than the fine point blade, on a thicker material doesn't like very intricate curves. I've also done it again there with the deep point or deep cut blade. That came out better, but the corners don't come out so well as they do with the knife blade. The knife blade goes in and out around a corner and gets a sharp corner. The deep cut blade goes around the corner and kind of bends the corners. So I like to use the knife blade on matte board when I want very sharp corners, but if I need detail, I'll use layers of thinner craft board, and you can get a really fine shapes in that. So that's why we go through the process of gluing and layering all these layers on this grandfather clock, is to get that lovely intricate scroll work effect. So that's one tip, that if you've got a design that's quite fine, you're better off using layers of a thinner material than a thicker one. And sometimes it won't even do the thicker one. The frame of this one particularly, you can see I've done that in with the knife blade up here. If I pop that out, and that came out quite well. So this is kind of, I would say, a good amount of detail to use in matte board, but if you get much thinner than that in terms of millimeters wide, it can chew the layers as well. But I'll put up some photos of that so that you can see more in depth what I'm talking about. The second point is that craft board, because it's you can't really see there, but it's the same colour all the way through. Matte board generally has a white core, but you can get different coloured outer layers. When you want to do something like this, you can see that even on the edges where I've used a stain, an actual wood stain on this product, it's sunk into the craft board and penetrates through the layers. If I did that with a white craft board, or even a brown coated craft board with a white core, I wouldn't get a consistent depth of colour. The core of the white matte board would look darker, and then the outside wouldn't have such a good effect as this brown craft board does as well. So that's another reason that I use a brown craft board when I want to have a wood effect material. It takes the stain really well. So those are my two reasons why I will use layers of craftboard, which sometimes seem a little bit long-winded, where we glue them and press them and wait for them to dry. But you do end up with a very sturdy product. There's no super glue put on this. This is just layers of craftboard glued together, and then I've used a wood stain and one coat of matte varnish. So that's why we're using craftboard. We'll go over to Design Space now, and I'll show you how to import the SVG and cut the file. Okay, so here we are in Design Space. If you click on the top little three bars and go to Settings, make sure you clicked Imperial, and then press Upload and go browse to your document folder, wherever you've stored your bundle, and we're going to download the clock base first. You'll see it appear here, and save it, and then click on it and insert the image onto the canvas. It might take a little while to come in, there's quite a few shapes. Once it's on the canvas, you can easily see that it's come in 12th scale because the 1-inch square matches that. Reduce the size of it if you want to see if you're working with the whole file. And this file is currently grouped. So when you click on it, you select everything. Scroll down until you find the green square and hit the I button to hide that, because we don't want to cut that out. Next, we're going to look at the labelled pieces. Ungroup it, and this will enable you to select just the text. Click the text, go up to the line type and change it from cut to draw. You'll see it will then look like outlines rather than a solid text. If you press the Shift button, you can select more than one piece of text at once. I'm actually hitting Select and Shift here at the same time. It's just taking a while for my computer to catch up, and then we can change all of the text to draw. What we then want to do, if we hit Make It Now, you'll see that the text is not attached to the pieces. So we need to go back and make sure that we select the text onto the relevant piece. So just put a border around the text and the one piece you want it attached to, and click Attach. And now if you click Make It, you'll see that it's put the one piece with the text attached to it over onto the cutting mat. So we do that for all of the pieces. What you could do at this point is label every piece if you wanted to. We've set the SVG file out so you can see the copies of each shape are right next to it. So you could just copy and duplicate the text and place it on the corresponding piece if you wanted to label every piece. But I think it's easy to match them up once you've got one piece labelled. They're all the same size. So you can go through and individually attach the text to every piece if you wanted to. Again, you'll see that it brings them over onto the mat, and this is laid out in the best use of material way. So it hasn't laid them out necessarily in the order that it's on the canvas. If you want to cut out everything in this order, select everything and hit Attach. And then you'll see when you go to cut it, it will actually cut everything in exactly the same order that it is on the canvas. You might find this easier the first time that you cut and build this project. Once you get to know which pieces go where, you probably won't even need the labels, but this is a really good idea when you're first starting out. Then click continue, and you need your machine switched on, and it will look for your machine. Mine takes a little while here to find it. Once it's found your machine, you want to select Kraftboard. Mine's in my favourite section. If you haven't got yours there yet, browse all materials, and it's in the first section of Artboard, and there it is, Kraftboard. And you'll notice that there's a little gold star, and you can hover over the gold star and click it, and that puts it over onto your favourite section. So click Kraftboard. I use the more pressure on setting on mine. You need to load the pen into the clamp, make sure the fine point blade is in clamp B, and then we'll load up the mat, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we are going to use, I use my green mat. If you've got a new blue mat, that would work. Mine needs to be a little bit stickier. So this is Kraftboard, and all we do is at the top of the mat here, you can see we line the Kraftboard up with the top and the side lines, and then we would, if I was on a flat surface now, we'd press this down evenly and use a brayer and smooth out any gaps and press the Kraftboard down onto the mat. That's ready to go in. If we're going to do the labelling, you would have got a pen with your Cricut machine when you first got it to do the project, and you'll see that there is a down arrow on there, and to put it into the clamp, it's always clamp A, and make sure you open it to give it, sort of loosen it up, and as you put it in, you'll see the arrow. Press on the top until it clicks, and then close the clamp. To get it out, remember to open the clamp before you pull it out. And they always say to store these pens with the nib pointing down. So that's how we install the pen. And then for Kraftboard, we use the fine point blade that came with your machine when you first got it. So that is it, ready to go. The feed light is flashing. We put this in. There's 2 lugs there. We want to make sure it goes under those lugs on each side. Always push the mat gently from the bottom as you press feed, and if you're using Kraftboard, make sure that your white rollers are spaced out along this bar to help sort of feed the Kraftboard in. If you're doing anything thicker like mat board or basswood, you move those over to the side and make sure that your material is no wider than 11 inches, and then that gives the gap there for these rollers to roll up and down on and not mark your material. But we're going to use Kraftboard. We gently push it at the bottom, press the feed, and off it goes. And then I haven't actually got a program loaded up to cut at the minute, but at this point the Cricut little button would flash, we'd press that and it would start cutting. So here are the finished pieces for the base, cut out from Kraftboard. Ignore my mat, it's kind of a long one that I've chopped down. And you can see here we've got them positioned for best use of material, and they're labelled, and you can easily see the sort of the ones that are the same size as each other. So we're going to take those off of the mat, and an easy way to do that is to turn it upside down and then slightly, I don't know if you can see that, we're going to roll this one back, and they kind of pop off quite easily then by doing this. And those are all the pieces. A couple of them might get stuck. You can just use an X-Acto knife to free them up rather than pull them and tear them. one's got a little bit of extra. They don't take much pressure. And I'm use the setting a little more pressure for my Kraftboard setting. Probably because my blade's quite old now. So if you find that your pieces aren't cutting all the way through on Kraftboard, with the regular default pressure setting, just increase that to more pressure. It doesn't take long to free the last couple up. There we go. And then we can just sort through them. It's easy to find out or find the squares. These are going to be the front of the base. So there's 3 at the front and 3 at the back. So we'll find those first. If you did cut your pieces in the little robot exploded diagram shape, that's much easier. You know where each piece is. You can work from the top down or the bottom up. But it doesn't take long to sort these out into pieces the same size and shape. We've got 3 for the side. And then we've got the BL1, which is the bottom layer one, and the bottom layer 2. Somewhere around here is a TL1. There's lots of the bottom layer one because that's a nice thick, the thick edge there. So if you suddenly think, well, I've got so many layers, that's right, you've got a lot of those. And then the next thing you need is your glue. I use Aleene's tacky glue. I always keep it stored upside down. And I use my stainless steel bench block. You could easily use a book. You might want to use some a silicone sheet or greaseproof paper so that the glue doesn't stick to your book. This doesn't the glue doesn't stick to it, and I'll use that to weigh everything down as it dries, so it keeps the layers nice and flat. Okay, so I thought I'd actually lay them out as they are in Design Space to make it easier. You don't have to do this, but just so that you can look at that and work out which pieces are which. I'll put all the base level ones together because I haven't got room on the screen. So it's very easy. I like to glue mine in pairs first, and the reason is they'll all fit at the same level under here, so we can glue several pairs. And if you had one that was 4 layers and one that was 2, it'd be like that. So I like to do all the pairs first, and then once they're dry, I'll go back and glue the corresponding pieces. So I can do these layers because they're all 2, that's 2, and then I'll do 2 each of the base, front and back, and the sides. And then when you've got 3 layers, don't glue the last 2 layers together. They need to have remained for these each side, or you'll end up with 3 sides, if you follow me. So let's go. And it's up to you whether you cover up the writing, now you know which piece is which, or whether you leave it visible. The only difference would be if you were going to paint this and some of the letters were visible in the finished make, you'd need to prime this probably with a couple of coats of primer so that that lettering didn't show through. So I like to cover mine up, but especially for your first build, you might want to leave it uncovered so that you know when you're building it which bit is which, and then the second time you do it you kind of get to know a file very quickly and you'll know which bit's which. So that's up to you. I'm going to leave them on the top now for the purposes of the tutorial, because I've already got my finished ones. There you go, so I know what it looks like when it's done. So let's start. You don't really need very much glue at all. What you don't want to do, if you're making the brown Kraftboard version and you want to stain it, you don't want excess glue sticking out, because the stain doesn't take where the glue is, so you'll have funny little streaks. So if you know that you want to stain it and you're not sure how accurate a gluer you are, I'd stain all the pieces of Kraftboard first and then glue them together. So all we do is line up all the edges. That's 2 pieces there. Once you're happy that they're nice and level, they just go under the block. So it's quite quick. You can do several at a time. Kraftboard, I like to spray prime mine. You can hand paint them, but the spray gives a lovely smooth finish. And always, if you're not sure how to line up the edges, you can always just sort of push them down together on the workbench so that the edges line up flat. Okay, once they've dried, we can add the next level of layers to the side and the front and back of the base. So we've got 2 layers, we're going to add the third for each one, because they're 3 layers, everything else is 2. And another little tip, when you get your pieces off of the mat, there is a definite top and bottom. You probably can't see it very well there, but where the knife blade or the fine point blade cuts, the top piece lifts up slightly. You'll just feel it more than you can see it. So I like to make sure all my pieces kind of pointing the same way when I glue them, and I think that helps the layers sit better on top of each other. But you probably don't need to worry about that for your first ever make. Once you get a little bit more confident, you'll be able to feel the difference, and then you might see the difference when you start making things. So we'll leave those to dry and we'll come back. The next thing to glue are all the base layers. So we've got 4 pairs, which is 8 layers altogether. So again, we'll glue those. And you could do them in pairs, let them dry, and then glue the whole stack together. It's up to you how accurate you are at gluing and how confident you are that you can keep them sort of all straight on the edges. So I would probably glue those 2 pairs now and let them dry, but just for the sake of the tutorial, we'll glue all of them together. So that's now a block of 8 layers. And you could make this in matte board, but if you're going to be using the brown Kraftboard for the wood finish, this is why I would use 8 layers of Kraftboard, so that you can stain it. If you're going to paint it, anything sort of going vertically up, so these layers here, they'll only increase or decrease the height. That's okay if you were out by a millimetre or so. It's more crucial when you're doing the depth of something that you get the depth of the material right. But we're going with Kraftboard, and as you can see, it is possible to get a really nice flat edge with Kraftboard, and if you're really bothered to get a sort of smoother edge, you can just run some super glue over there. It's self-leveling, it dries nice and smooth, and it will take the paint. It does dry shiny though, so you want to only do that if you know you're going to be painting over it, and stain before you do it if you're going to be staining. So another thing that I use are these. They're very handy, and they will apply an even pressure like that. So that's another way to be able to just keep the layers all together while they dry. And these are from a shop in the UK called Wilko, but you can get them anywhere and they're quite cheap. So that's the base layers, and then we've got the top layer 1 and 2 and 3, and then this is the base, the second base layer 2, which will go on the top of base layer 1. So we can glue the top layers together, and this is the top. We're talking about these layers here. I don't know if you can see that very well. Yeah, just creates a nice stepped effect there. So it's the wider on the bottom going up to the narrower on the top. So the bottom, the biggest one is TL1, then we would put TL2 on the top of that and TL3 on the top of that. And if you notice, these clocks are very sort of flush at the back. They're all straight at the back and then staggered at the front. So rather than try and guess all the way round sort of the distance, we know that we can put them down on the mat and get the back edge completely flush there. So that's straight, and then these are staggered. And you could measure the side ones if you wanted to with a pencil before you glue them, but I'm happy to eyeball them. So I'll start with the smaller one first. So TL3 goes on top of TL2. We'll get it in the middle widthways but flush at the back, and always put the glue on the smallest piece. But always have a dry fit first and make sure that you're happy with it before you start gluing. So I'm just making sure it's central that way and flush at the back. I don't know if it will focus in on that. There you go, flush there and staggered all the way round. And then I'll do the same, putting glue on the base of TL2 and gluing it onto TL1. Eyeballing it, it looks nice and central. So that's what it should look like. And again, we can use these clamps there. They'll just grip it nice. They kind of don't mark it, or these ones don't mark it, and leave that to set. And now we've got the front and the back pieces and the side pieces. And I don't know if you can see that, the side pieces fit inside, so they join up to the front and back. So when we've got a piece front or back, this one, I don't know how closely I can get that in, fits in there. So the glue goes on this edge and then fits up to that, that one there. But I'll show you. We'll put the glue on, and you don't really need much glue. And can I? No, that's better there. Obviously you want to make sure they're the same height, and then this one will fit up and onto there. But it's good to do it on the bench so that you get them the same height. Push them down, and then sort of the top and bottom edge. Wipe any excess glue off. And you just want to make sure that the edge is flush. And then just hold it. You don't have to hold it very long. I do use a gluing jig for larger pieces. These small pieces go off so quickly. I find I don't need to use a gluing jig. Can you see that there? Nice, and make sure it's a right angle. So that's one side. We'll do the other side. So again, that's gluing on the edge. Put it on the bench and bring it up to the inside. Wipe off any excess glue. If I was doing this on the brown craft board and going to stain it, I'd be a little bit more careful with my gluing. So there, we've got that one now. And I've automatically put the S for the side piece there on the inside. And then all that remains is to put that one on, and of course we'll need to put the glue on these edges, and then that will fit on top like that. If they're towing in a bit, you can just pull them out slightly. Make sure you've got it the right way up. If they are, you would see if they were, let me get it the other way around. There's definitely, it's too tall if it's one way. So it's definitely going to be obvious which way around. And I think line it up with one side first. And then when you're happy with that, bring it down onto the other side. And mine needs just to be pulled out slightly before I put it on there. And then once you've got that box, you can make sure the height is even on sort of all these edges and tweak out the sides if they need to. Wipe off any excess glue, and then I would just hold that for a couple of seconds. It will soon take, and then you can leave that to dry. It will be slightly flexible, but once we glue it onto the base and put the top layers on, we'll have a very sturdy box. So that's cool. So if we get our base layer ones back, the big chunk, all we want to do now is put base layer 2 on the top, and again we're lining it flush at the back and just a little gradient all the way around. And this time I am going to hide my BL2 labelling underneath so that it doesn't show through. And it will cover up the BL1 labelling too. So put that on, make sure it's flush at the back, and then just check you like the width either side. Again, is that going to pick that up? White isn't the easiest to show, but then black and brown kind of aren't great either. So hopefully you can see that. So we've got our base piece now, and if you can imagine, when this gets glued onto there flush at the back, you just have again a nice, oh there we go, which way around there, beveled edge effect. So I'll clamp those with these mini clamps while that dries. We'll get our top levels back, TL1, 2 and 3, and they just fit neatly on top of there to create a box. So we're going to put glue all the way around this top edge. Have a look, if you feel that there's a better front or back or top edge, do have a look, and it's up to you, whichever face you want facing out or up. Put glue all around this edge, all these edges. And then it will just fit on the top. Squeeze out any excess glue and wipe that off. Make sure it's square. And there you have it. So again, make sure where your layers were flush at the back, that goes flush with the back of this box. You can put weights on top while they dry, and I would balance that on like that, and it keeps it and pushes everything down so that the glue fills in the tiny gaps. And then we've got the base again with the flush edge here, and we'll glue that on, lining it up at the back there. So make sure you've got the flush edge of everything at the back now to line up with that one. That's about the only thing, and you'd soon see if you hadn't got that the right way around. It would look a bit odd. Squeeze out or wipe off any squeezed out glue. And that is that. That's the base. It's very sturdy. I'm going to put the weight on it now and just let that press down while it dries. So that's what we've created, but in white craftboard. We'll let that set up, and then we'll come back in the next chapter and we'll look at creating the middle section of the clocks and the choice of doors that you've got. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.